Hello, everybody. This is the incorrect thing here. Let's change this topic to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is kind of weird, but it's 2 in the morning. I'm going to do some quick YouTube commentary here. Let's do this, actually. Bloop. Boom, bam, bing. Okay, so this is a video from Razbuten. What games are like for someone who doesn't play games. So I have my own version of this, my own commentary that I would like to say about this, but I will save that for after something. Let's make this full screen, I guess, or like that at least. Yeah, that works. Okay. Let's watch it.
Last year, the lady I live with, also known as my wife, asked if she could try out one of the games I've been playing. She described it as the one with the cute little ghost guy, and after scrolling through my entire library, I realized she was talking about Hollow Knight. Given the fact that her experience with video games at that point consisted of the occasional race,
I think I started watching this, by the way.
Crash Bandicoot levels from when she was a kid, I knew with fair confidence that her playing Hollow Knight would go.
Hi, everybody.
terrible. So obviously, I booted it up and set her into the world of Hollow Knight. As she played, every moment, regardless of how seemingly insignificant, had a strange sort of intensity to it. For example, in the tutorial there are a set of platforms that the player needs to jump across. The only penalty for falling is a little bit of time, and on my first playthrough I breezed past it and immediately forgot about it. For her, it was intense beyond belief. She wasn't sure what the penalty for falling would be, and she didn't have a full grasp on how to adjust her jump height and distance. Each successful jump felt like a triumph, and after landing, she'd look out at the next platform, searching for the nerve to jump again. Watching her work through this early section and seeing the different ways that she viewed the game got me thinking a lot about the language of video games, and just how much a person's level of video game literacy affects their experience with any given title. I can't really think of a time in my life where I wasn't interested in games, and because of that, there are certain aspects about them that are almost instinctual to me now. And that's because a lot of games use the same ideas and vocabulary in order to get information across to players as quickly.
You could say that again.
It's why the color red is almost always associated with health, why the A button
It's
or
green a lot of the
is
time, too.
typically the command to jump, and why platformers more often than not have players moving from left to right. At this point, I've played enough games where after 5 minutes of trying a new one, I almost always know what to expect, no matter the kind of game. But that inherent understanding of how games work and what to expect from them doesn't exist for the lady I live with because she hasn't spent time learning those things. And this made me wonder, how do people learn the basics of video games? So I decided to run an informal experiment where I'd have her play a handful of titles and see how she approached figuring each one of them out in the hopes of getting a better understanding of how people learn the language of video games. In an effort to not influence how she approached any given title, I didn't give her any advice or instructions. I just watched, silently judging. I had her play through the early sections of 9 games: Super Mario Bros., Shovel Knight, Celeste, Portal, Doom,
Hollow says, hilariously recent Doom ports changed medkits to green because the red cross people... Oh, interesting. Huh. How about that? I know in League of Legends health is green. I'm not sure if red or green is more popular for health, but they're both very popular.
Skyrim, The Last of Us, Uncharted 2, and so that I could really test the strength of our marriage, Dark Souls. I picked these titles because A, I felt there would be a solid sampling of 3 major types of games, those being 2D platformers, 3D platformers, and first-person shooters / adventures, while also offering a diverse spread of genres and gameplay mechanics, and B, I like them. So this is how it went. Just kidding, we're so good. With each game, I noticed that there were a vast amount of seemingly basic functions and mechanics that she either didn't fully grasp or know existed. This first came up with Mario 1-1. She figured out the jump easily enough, but never realized she had the ability to dash, making her time with the level painfully hard to watch. There are no in-game instructions on how to dash or do anything else really, so players will only learn about it if they read the instruction manual, figure it out through experimentation, or have another person tell them how it works, as she didn't even know it was something she could do.
Which, by the way, in those early days, reading the instruction manual was a thing that people actually did. So, you know, like, we tend to think of, like, oh, those early games, they don't have any tutorial or anything, but, like, people would actually read those instruction manuals back in the day. So, like, those kind of were part of the software back then. But yeah.
Figured it out. For me, it has become second nature to try to sprint in games, whether or not I know it's an option. I just assume it will be and guess the command will probably be the B button or its equivalent. But I only make that assumption because of years of being conditioned to make it. Figuring out the controls for all of the games, whether they were explicitly explained or implicitly taught through level design, was a challenge for her. Part of this stems from her not being all that comfortable with a controller. Anytime a game asked for her to press a certain button, she'd look down at the controller and search for it. One of the most memorable instances of this came up while playing The Last of Us. Early on, there's a prompt on the screen to press L3, which she couldn't find on the controller as there is no button labeled L3. She noticed it was shaped like a circle, so she guessed it might be one of the joysticks. However, she didn't know that it meant to press down on it, so she just sort of moved back and forth.
Why would you make it L3?
I've
Ridiculous.
certainly played games that do a better job of illustrating how L3 and R3 work, but it is kind of weird that there's pretty much a hidden button on all controllers that new players
very
have
weird.
no reason to know exists. Figuring out a game's controller sounds easy, but she essentially not only had to memorize which buttons did what, but also which buttons were where, adding another layer of things to keep track of and making the process a little bit more overwhelming. She typically fared better with games that didn't give too much information to remember. With Dark Souls, after reading 15 or so messages explaining the controls, she said she felt like she was getting too much information too quickly. A lot of the things she learned, most notably the lock-on feature, she forgot about by the time they would actually be useful. On the other side of things, with Shovel Knight, she struggled to get through a few of the early sections because she didn't understand the full scope of her abilities or how to use them, but once she did start to figure things out through experimentation, she ended up remembering the core mechanics better because she witnessed firsthand how useful they could be. So for her at least, giving a memorable use of a mechanic made it stick in her mind a lot clearer. Most of the games I had her play were with a controller, but I did want her to have some
The button names thing is still an issue for me because all the controllers. First of all, I mean, I don't really play that many console games, but also like, I'm still not over that PlayStation put the X on the bottom when Super Nintendo had the X on the top. I feel like that was like this really like passive aggressive move because they were originally making the CD. What was it? The Super Nintendo CD system or something. That was very irritating. And then since then, and then Xbox I think has X in a different place, and it's all fucked up.
So I had her try a few games with a first-person perspective. I thought Portal would be the best place to start as it doesn't call for quick reflexes and it gives players time to figure things out. Using the keyboard actually proved to be easier for her than the controller as she uses a keyboard every day and knows where everything is. However, if you've been paying attention to the footage, you've probably noticed that she isn't looking around at all. And that's because she didn't realize she was supposed to use the mouse.
So I mean, one of the things that fears I have for this video is like, can you summarize the entire video by saying like, there's all this information that people who play video games know because they've been playing video games forever? Like, for example, that you can do mouse look as an example. Like, yeah, I agree. If someone, I mean, that's kind of obvious. If someone hasn't played games, I guess there are, you know, from that, I mean, to me, it's more interesting. Like, what I've always found really interesting is like, I have an anecdote of, actually it was Oro, which is not a terribly violent game, but I remember showing it to somebody's mom, and she was like clearly like sort of just like disgusted a little bit, or like had this like disgust reaction to the fact that you were like killing these monsters. And to me, like that kind of stuff is more interesting, like the way that we take certain like kind of aesthetic experiences for granted that like, oh, I would want to kill these things. Obviously, to me that's more interesting than like knowing some specific that mouse look as a control scheme type of thing. But let's see where it's going.
In fairness, the instructions at the start explain how to move and how to pick things up. They do assume that players will just know to use the mouse to look around. Given that she doesn't spend her free time watching me play games on my computer, why would she? I know that a lot of these little issues she ran into in regards to controls and mechanics all seem easy to overcome, and in a lot of ways they are, but they do still act as small barriers to entry for new players. Even when games have detailed explanations for things, it can sometimes be information overload, and it isn't
Totally.
uncommon for people to skip over explanations accidentally or on purpose because they don't feel like reading a bunch of stuff.
I mean, when I play a new game, including actually maybe more so even like new board games, the first time you play them, like you just have to just kind of skim a lot of rules and not really process them until you've played a few times. And then like some rule that your friend told you right when you sat down, like 3 games in, you're like, oh, I can blankety blank, and they're like, yeah, I told you that. It's like you can't absorb so much information at once.
Just want to beat the shit out of something. A lot of titles seem to assume that players will have at least some familiarity with controls, so some of the more simple explanations are kind of just left out. And I think the way most people end up learning these basic things that they won't figure out without searching on their own is through other people. For example, back to Mario. I don't remember how I learned to sprint in the game, but as I know I would not have read the instruction manual, there's a pretty decent chance that my brother told me how to do it, and I wouldn't.
He probably read the instruction manual.
I told him, and so on and so on. Also, the only reason I understand half the things I do in Dark Souls is because I've scoured wikis and message boards on how to get good. Video games are best when they are a communal experience, and a big part of that stems from the sharing of knowledge. Obviously, someone being a backseat gamer can get annoying if they explain how to do everything, but getting assistance when it's needed most can make a game far more enjoyable. It bridges the gap between the games expect players to already know and what they actually do know.
Oh, by the way, I played ARMS finally because it was free on the Switch. And this just reminded me of these like videos. But it turns out, no wonder. I was like, when it came out, it sounded like such a cool idea. And I was like, hey, why is no one talking about this ARMS thing? It just came out and then it just disappeared and no one talked about it. And I was always perplexed as to why. And then right when I loaded the software, I immediately understood why. It's because it's one of these games. Where you have to like fling the stupid thing around. You can't just like push the buttons. So that's why.
Most of the frustration
well.
that the lady I live with had while playing boiled down to not being able to figure things out that she didn't know existed, which is something that would have been solved had I not just been a silent observer. Given that I was, though, she found herself continuing to have problems, and one of those is summed up best by her most frequently asked question: when it came to the 2D platformers, navigating wasn't especially difficult for her. Because the options were limited, it was pretty easy for her to figure out that she needed to go right and sometimes up. So
all games should be 2D.
We have a few optional rooms players can go in, but for the most part, whenever she entered one, she could tell it wasn't the path she wanted to take. Although Shovel Knight does have a side room in the tutorial that heads to the right and seems like the main path despite not being it, and there was a fair amount of disappointment as she realized she did all that work for nothing.
Are you fucking kidding me?
However, for all the 3D games, navigating proved far more difficult. She spent a lot of time wrestling with the camera in third-person games, and she wasn't all that great at moving and looking around at the same time in first-person ones.
And we all spend that time wrestling with the camera. We're just used to it. She's not.
Rotating the camera around a ton, she didn't always get a great sense of her surroundings, so she struggled with figuring out where she was and where she was going. Like in Skyrim, she missed the jump from the tower to the house during the tutorial, and it took a while for her to realize that she had fallen back to the spot where she started. Also, because she wasn't good at focusing her camera, she didn't realize she was supposed to be following Hadvar, so she was sort of just strolling along, trying to get out of the city in her own way. Once she did follow him and got into the build,
RFFG Pfeiffer, aka Bob, says, IMO, this suffers from being too capital G gamer focused a selection of games. There's no Civ 5 in there, no A Good Snowman, no Black and White. Yeah, but I think that that a lot of these things would apply maybe even more so to some of those games. Like these games are supposed to be the really like accessible games. I think that's why these are good examples. Like these are the console games that like, everyone plays. Whereas like Civ 5 is more of like, okay, that's like it's like a more of a specialized strategy gamer game sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think these are fine examples. Because like, if anything, the points would just be even stronger in like Civ 5, wouldn't they? Or maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say, I guess. I guess everything is so much more explicit and sort of arbitrary in those turn-based games that maybe it's less of a thing.
Building, she was more interested in picking up everything she saw instead of moving forward, which actually is fair and how most people play Skyrim. Either way, she wasn't fully sure where to go. Interestingly, after we finished all the games, I brought up the footage of Skyrim and showed her the compass at the top of the screen, and she said that she hadn't noticed it while playing, as she was mostly just focused on what was directly in front of her. The same thing happened with Doom's compass and even the health bars of enemies and bosses in Dark Souls. She typically noticed waypoints on the screen when they showed up, but she didn't know what they were for, so she often ignored them. Players are hit with a lot of information when they play games, and for ones who aren't all that comfortable with the basics, a lot of
like gamers. I know people who are gamers who play all these games, but who, when they see Civ, they're like, oh my god, what the fuck is this? So like, I think the idea here is that these are games that most people who play games at all think are like, very easy to understand and stuff like that. Or these are only games with a fantasy to sell. Yeah, I guess it's just like, if this is true of these games because they are so mechanically simple, then it seems like it'd be even more true of other games.
A lot of that information's pushed to the side, acting as another barrier for entry. Another thing that confused her was when progression in a level wasn't entirely linear. Like with Dark Souls, she got confused when the level looped back around on itself, and she made the assumption that she had messed up and gone the wrong way. Most of the games she had played before Dark Souls had typical progression, so finding herself back near where she started felt odd. Even the 3D games that seemed like they might be more straightforward had a few things that ended up being confusing for her. For example, in Uncharted 2, what a player can climb is indicated by being colored yellow, but that wasn't obvious to her, so she constantly tried to climb things that just looked like they could be climbed. And then she questioned why she had to take the longer, more roundabout path when there were perfectly good handholds right above her. A similar
That's a good question.
Happened with The Last of Us as well. There's a part where the player has to run through a city to escape, and
I know the producer has made this kind of a series. I could probably see if he'll dig out a strategy game.
gas station explodes, causing street lamps and other things to block the road ahead. My wife noticed a little gap on the sidewalk that was untouched by fire, so she kept trying to run through that to get out. But every time she did, the infected came and killed her. This made her think that the issue wasn't with it being the wrong way to go, but rather with her not being fast enough. So she kept trying that same...
All these like dumb video game thing. He said wife? I don't get it. Is this not his wife? I thought this was his wife. Yeah, it's his wife. Why is that funny?
Path over and over before finally finding the right way. With game design, there's often a battle between having a level look realistic and making it easy to navigate. In this example, Naughty Dog tried to make the city feel more natural.
So yeah, like gamers who play these games in particular are very like, whether they know it or not, they're like super tuned to like, what am I supposed to be doing? And like, they're, it's kind of like this, like weird implicit agreement between the developer and the game player that they're gonna like go through the movie in basically like a predictable way and not do anything too weird, unless they're like explicitly doing like, haha, I'm doing a trolling thing, and that's one of the things that I hate so much about them. She's playing in a way that's like ignorant of that whole thing and probably assuming like, oh, this is just like, what would I do if I was in this situation? This is like a fantasy simulation, and it's not. It's like you have to kind of guess your role in this movie is really what it is. The other thing is it applies to games that your proverbial novice wants to play. I brought up Guitar Hero when watching this with my wife. Further discussion still to occur.
by not having every path be physically blocked off. And while more experienced players will most likely see the explosion and assume they should go a different way, the game falls short on helping players who don't understand what they're supposed to do. By having the signal be the explosion, but the consequence being an attack by the infected, she learned the wrong lesson. And this sort of thing ended up happening to her a fair amount throughout the process, even with things that had nothing to do with navigation. Sometimes she just interpreted the information the game was giving her in the wrong way, and she found herself the idea
Frozen
that some
2.
games teach players how to play simply
That
through
piano
gameplay
thing
and
sounded like
level
Frozen
design is
2.
a pretty common talking point in the video game community. I'm a firm believer that
Wait, what did he say?
And
Hold
watching
on.
a pretty common talking point. Some games teach players how to play simply through gameplay and level design is a pretty common talking point in the video game community. I'm a firm believer that a lot of games do this, and watching her play reaffirmed that thought. For example, in Doom, her initial instinct was to stay as far away from enemies as possible, because she didn't feel all that comfortable with the controls of a first-person shooter. However, once she came across enemies who threw fireballs at her from a distance that did way more damage than anything she could do from that same range, she started to realize that her best bet was to get close to enemies and either beat the crap out of them or use the shotgun. Ultimately, Doom is meant to be played this way. The glory kill system and the handful of weapons that are powerful at close range are included
Close
in the
range.
fast-paced, action-packed fighting style. And having
the
one of
Onion
first
video.
wounds be extremely difficult to beat without playing this way sets the expectation for the rest of the game. It took her a fair bit of banging her head against the wall to get past this room. But once she did, she was better at the core mechanics of the game than when she started. With that said, what I found even more interesting than when she learned the right lessons of how to play a game through gameplay was when she learned the wrong ones. The first instance of this that I noticed happened while playing Mario 1-1. At the beginning of the level, there's a question mark box with a mushroom in it. She had some familiarity with the Mario franchise, so she knew that mushrooms were good to get. However, after hitting the box, she jumped into a different block, causing the mushroom to change directions and go off the left side of the screen, out of reach. She didn't register that she had caused the mushroom to change directions, leading her to the assumption that mushrooms would always end up going to the left. When she got to another block that she suspected held the mushroom, she hit it and immediately moved to the left to grab it before it went off screen, and, well, this was a far less intrusive lesson to get wrong than the ones that came up while she played Celeste and Shovel Knight. The tutorial of Celeste is a pretty simple stage that ends with the player learning how to dash, which is arguably the most important and useful mechanic in the game. The lady I live with interpreted the prompt to mean that the only way to dash was by doing it at an upward angle, pretty much crippling her ability to do screens effectively until after 15 minutes or so when she accidentally dashed horizontally and realized her moveset was wider than she had thought. With Shovel Knight, early on she died from hitting this bubble. A bag of gold popped out and hovered near it. On her next time through, she jumped on the bubble and the bag at the same time and assumed that both things had damaged her, causing her to think that the bags of gold were an enemy of some sort. So when she came across them after that, she would either try to attack them or actively avoid them. As she wasn't paying terribly close attention to the HUD, she never realized what they actually did. I'm not saying that these things are the faults of the game developers, but it is interesting how easily information on screen can be misunderstood. These sort of things can happen to players of all skill levels, but given her lack of experience, she didn't have much else to go on to challenge the lessons she thought she had learned. I found the disconnect between how she thought games worked and how they actually worked to be pretty intriguing. And as I focused more on those differences, I started to notice a sort of trend with every title she played. That being, when most people talk about what any video game is like, there's often a greater focus on the general actions players can do rather than the limitations that make it possible for the game
I think he's just trying to use different things. He's been using different terms, I think.
to function. For example,
yeah.
Mass Effect could be described as a role-playing game where, among other things, players get the opportunity to talk to and form relationships with various characters across the universe.
I mean, she thought games would be cooler. That's what I was talking about with The Last of Us. She didn't realize that, no, you have a part to play and you just have to go through these motions. Yeah, video games, especially these kind of video games, are just so much less than what you would think they are and that's how they're sold, and it's like we still are sold this fantasy of what these games are. And we still have to on some level believe that fantasy in order to buy them and get excited about them and stuff. That's why I often say that video games are at their absolute best at the moment that you purchase them. Because you just get that purchasing, I'm a good consumer kind of rush, but also you're envisioning what this is going to be like, and you haven't been hit yet with the realization of like, nah, it's just one of these.
Who play a lot of games will most likely go in understanding that this actually means players will be able to form relationships with a predetermined cast of characters by choosing responses from a set of limited dialogue options. As it turns out, this formula makes for a really great series, but there is a gap between what a game sounds like and what it actually looks like. And I think for people who don't end up playing a lot of games but have to suffer through listening to their friends or partners talk about them, they get a warped perception about what players can do in a title because they don't understand or know the systems that games use in order to give these grand sounding experiences. Where I know to apply a sort of video game logic to any title I play, the lady I live with was always trying to apply real world logic. Like in the Doom tutorial, there's a gore nest that the player needs to destroy. A waypoint marker shows up on it, which when I first played, I knew meant I needed to go up to it and most likely hit a button prompt. When my wife played, she didn't know what the marker meant, so her initial instinct wasn't to walk right up to it. Instead, she noticed while messing around that the red barrels exploded, so she had the idea to try to push one of the barrels towards the nest to blow it up. And
See, she thinks video games are going to have like emergent complexity and like the ability for players to do creative things and solve things in their own way. Heartbreaking.
this is objectively more interesting than just pressing a
Yeah.
button to destroy it. But of course, it didn't work. Throughout the various games, a pretty common question she asked was, why can't I do it this way? And my response was, because. The deeper answer is that limitations exist in games because there are only so many potential inputs a title can have, meaning there are a finite number of ways a player can interact with things.
Nah. That's some shit. It's because we have a value system and that's designed around like selling products and screenshots and videos that look a certain way, and we value production, in terms of like audio visual production values, and there isn't. There's not enough room in development for, programming, testing, game design that is required to actually create emergent complexity and sort of deep interactive systems. Generally, it's too risky. We have these formulas, and these are products that just we want to like. It just makes more sense to keep reproducing these products. They're very safe, and so it's a values thing. It's not. I super disagree with the idea that it's like, oh, it's games can only have so much. Oh, this is just how it is. It's like, no, this is not just how it is. It doesn't have to be this way. Devs want to make sure people all see the same story beats. Yeah, that too. I mean, like there's this, you need to have it be a very guaranteed experience, because it's a consumable object. It's like the same concept as, it's like mass production, abstraction. I've Somotion is abstraction. I don't know what that is. Imagine the guy who reviews the game for Kotaku doesn't have the same experience during the boss fight and doesn't get a cool screenshot. Exactly. Yeah. If there's emergence, something boring can happen sometimes. Something stupid can happen.
Developers tried to program in every possible way a player might think about interacting with something. Games would just never come out. I'm used to these.
I mean, that's offloading the responsibility onto us. This person has the like. Do you see what I'm saying? It's kind of hard to explain that, but like, it's like he's baking in the assumption that, and then maybe fairly that these have to be these massive like movie like experiences first, and then if they want to have all the emergence and stuff, yeah, of course it would never come out.
Actually appreciate them in a lot of instances. However, for her, she got frustrated when the ideas she came up with didn't work. Like while scaling the train in Uncharted 2,
Yeah.
she reached a point
Valid.
where she wanted to swing from a
Dude,
pipe
people who don't play games, I've said this forever, but people who don't play games are so much smarter about games than people who play a lot of games, generally speaking. Because like his wife, I trust her more probably than I would trust him. in terms of like if I were, trying to design a system or something, and she was like willing to like go with me and learn the rules and talk to me about the rules. Like I feel like I would trust her opinion more about what was good than his, because all of our opinions have been just like put through this horrible ringer. Yeah.
Through a window. So when she realized she had to take the predetermined path that didn't take much more than pressing left, she felt
Soul crushing.
disappointed because
Yes.
yeah, her idea was cooler. In Skyrim, as Alduin began attacking the city, she found a spot in a house and figured she'd just wait it out until he left. But due to the scripted nature of this part of the game, that plan didn't.
So I'm guessing like somewhere around here in the video, or like around, you can't see my mouse cursor, but like, in the last third, there's going to be like a apologism section where it's like, ignore everything I just said, video games are the best.
Didn't work, forcing her to follow the path the game wanted her to follow. In turn, this took away all the tension of this section because she knew she could take as long as she wanted and nothing bad would happen. Hiding in a house isn't that fun of a way to play a game, but her not being able to made it feel like she lost some agency. Her expectations for what she thought she could do in each game were always different than the reality, and I think as she realized that games were more simple...
And actually, if you watch me play, I try to return to that sort of way of thinking. Like, I think that when I play a lot of these games, it seems like I'm like dumber about video game conventions and like worse at video games than I am, because I don't want to like have that kind of brain. I want to have her kind of brain, where I go in and I do the things that seem natural and that would be exciting to me to do. And I try to do them, and then I get disappointed when I can't do them, because to do anything else is like, is just too sad.
She had first assumed, some of the intrigue about them faded.
Here we go. Is he gonna do it?
For the lady I live with, the thing she hated more than anything else about this experiment was having to replay sections of a level over and over again after dying. Had I not told her to keep trying on a handful of the games, she would have stopped far sooner, because it was understandably frustrating. With that said, when she did stick with games that frustrated her and ended up beating the parts that she struggled with, she found it exhilarating. I think this trade-off of dealing with frustration so that the excitement of beating something is all that much sweeter is one that people who play a lot of games not only understand, but look for. However, trying to pitch that she should spend her free time doing something that actively frustrates her,
not worth it.
A few moments where she succeeds feel glorious is a bit of a tough look.
No,
this
not worth it.
Has me questioning how I became interested in video games in the first place. I don't remember how they became such a big part of my life. I don't know how I got to the point where I could look at a compass at the top of a screen and know what to expect from every marker without looking them up. I don't know how I first learned about stamina bars and the various ways to make sure I don't run out of energy. I don't know how I became, I guess, fluent in the language of video games. I'm just glad that I learned the basics when I was young enough to not care about spending hours on one level. For a better understanding of how inexperienced players approach video games, I need to run a much wider and more complex study that tests in a more robust way than...
Let me catch up with Holographic Doll says, this is why I mentioned Guitar Hero, probably the only AAA game ever to sell itself as exactly what it is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, hit the notes in time to play the song. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I agree with you. Like, I don't hate Guitar Hero, I have, for a lot of these games in this video, like I do have like a very strong, like, anger towards them because of that, like, creativity crushing element. The like human spirit crushing element, and I don't have that feeling towards Guitar Hero. Like, I'm not excited to play Guitar Hero, but I would do it, and or any rhythm game. Yeah.
Sitting down to watch my wife play video games a few times, but I did find it interesting to compare how wildly different my approach to games.
By the way, I think you could say that also about like, block moving puzzle games and things like that. I think those also don't have that, because it's pretty clear that, what is possible in this system. You could say it maybe crushes your creativity, but it does it right up front. And it's very open about it. It's like, you're not going to be able to do anything cool in this whole thing. You just have to solve these puzzles. And then that's what it is. So it's like honest about that. That's cool. You can drum freestyle. That's pretty cool. All right, let's rewind a little bit. I just think I missed a couple things.
For a better understanding of how inexperienced players approach video games, I need to run a much wider and more complex study that tests in a more robust way than just sitting down to watch my wife play video games a few times. But I did find it interesting to compare how wildly different my approach to games is to hers. And
Hold on, more chats. I've done exactly what he proposes. Do play tests with random volunteers off the street. So have I. In my experience, you cannot make most games 100% beginner friendly. Completely agreed. Block pushing is cool. Yeah. I mean, like I said, like I don't have that anger towards block pushing. It is what it is, you know? And it's kind of a known quantity, and yeah, it's fine.
while I definitely don't have enough definitive information to make any sort of legitimate conclusion about how inexperienced players approach games, I do want to say this. In a similar way to how it is harder to learn a language as an adult, it's harder to get into video games after a lifetime of not playing them. And from what I've seen, that seems to have less to do with interest and more to do with struggling to get over the barriers that exist for new players. Like, if you don't know how to read, why would you pick up a book? What I'm getting at is if someone you know who doesn't play games expresses interest in trying one, don't force them to be in an experiment where you give no guidance and mostly just watch them struggle with something that they never learned how to do. Teach them how to read it instead.
So you want to pick that up, and now you have a very not annoying at all item.
Fucking get it.
You can use that to like wake things up and to break stuff.
Ooh.
That in the video.
Yeah.
You should always take that.
So of course I had to end on a happy note. Don't worry, gamers. Because inside this video is a really big point that is really like profound and important, and that I think that game players are not like interested in really internalizing. Which is that you have this like learned, it's almost like what's that thing where when if you get like kidnapped and you start to like your the syndrome, you start to like your kidnappers. There's a little bit of like something like that going on with video games where you and I think his point is right that it's like it's best if you get it early. Because you sort of get aestheticized towards like enjoying or feeling satisfaction in the process of having gone through and like completed the game. Stockholm, yeah, a little bit like that. And I mean, I don't know. You know, people have different preferences and people like things in different ways, and you know. It's possible that, but I mean, to me, like I've felt this way for a very long time. I've thought that people who don't play games understand games much better than people who do. You know, in terms of they haven't been sort of like propagandized. People assume games with realistic graphics are not puzzles or strategy games, but either sandboxes or sim plays. I mean, I think that's part of it. Is that the realistic graphics, but it's also like it's not just the graphics actually. As the Doom example, do you remember the Doom 2016 example? It actually had the interactivity that you could move barrels around and stuff like that. So like, and there is the interactivity in The Last of Us or something where you could like jump and climb on walls and stuff. So there actually is. It's not just the graphics. It's also that there is interactivity, and there's this like faux interactivity, where you think you can do a certain thing and you can't. Yeah, so like these simple 2D games tend to not have that issue as much, yeah, Fez has a clear visual language for climbing. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I'm trying to like formulate a thought. It's kind of late, so I'm kind of like having a difficult time saying things. But there is something there about like the very simple platformers as compared to like something like Doom. I guess, you know, if you think of like something like Gradius or Contra compared to something like Doom 2016, in Contra, there isn't like all you can do, like I'm talking about the original NES Contra, all you can do is like run and jump and shoot. And so that's pretty obvious up front, and your imagination is not really like, oh wow, I wonder if I could blank, you know? You kind of know what you can do up front, kind of like a box moving game. And but I think as games went on, there was more buttons and there's sort of more interactivity. And for me, like he asked that question early on or at some point in the video about like why did I start playing these things in the first place, and like thinking about Super Mario Brothers or whatever. And to me, the idea was intriguing about games was, okay, in this game you can't really do much, but like I could imagine a system like something like, for me in Super Mario Brothers, the fact that like you could jump pardon me, like the shell would be bouncing around and it would be doing things on its own. Like you bounce a shell into a couple of pipes and it takes out a bunch of Koopa Troopas, or you bounce on a Goomba and you get those bounce effects, things like that. Like those sort of like dangle the very beginnings of like emergent complexity and like creativity, that this could be a canvas on which I could like do stuff. And I think that we've kind of just been there to varying degrees. I think some games have allowed players to do more things, but like most of these big console games are really just about lying to the player. And and that's the thing, is that gamers know what they're going to get because they played these games so many times. And I think like sort of it's like this weird role-playing thing that they do, like this meta role-playing thing. Streets of Rogue. Okay. The idea that you should just be able to pick up a game and start playing is bad for games. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with like an in-game manual. Like, you know, you could have a paper manual, or you could have that the first section in the game is the manual and it kind of walks you through in an interactive way. I think that's actually even better than a physical manual. That's fine. But yeah, I think that, you know, games should have, if you're going to make a new game, it should probably have some original rules, and that will have to be taught to players. So yeah. Doom wants a part of your brain to have the illusion of a big, living, interactive world beyond the level bounds, but another part of your brain to make the decisions based on the simple vocabulary of the game. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I mean about like the role-playing aspect, like, and not role-playing in the game, like in the way that you typically think of it, but like, it's like a meta role-playing where like I know that I'm capable as a human being of like coming up with all these cool ideas, but I'm going to, you know, play as though I'm, you know, just a cog in this machine, and I'm going to do as I'm told, basically. And that's what I hate so much about them, is that there's just like this humanity stifling component. And yeah, that's something that makes me very angry. And so I would end this video with like a huge middle finger. But that's why I don't have 385,000 views, probably. That's one of the reasons. Or no, I'm sorry, 6 million views. 385,000 likes. I don't even know the difference between views and likes. That's another reason I don't have any views or likes. Yeah. Sweet. Streets of Rogue. Cool.
What's up, guys and gals?
Don't hate it when people talk on YouTube like I'm doing right now. I just want to see it for a couple seconds. It's funny because Blake has been talking about for a long time that he wants to make a like a real-time roguelike. I think he really just wants to make Castlevania music, which I want him to make also. And I want to make. Oh, this is still a tutorial. Let's go later. There's a sequel to this video, 2 or 3. Oh, it kind of like slows down when you go to the menu. Cool. This looks neat. Yeah, I should check this out, actually. You know what's funny? I thought Streets of Rogue was going to be like River City Ransom for some reason. Like that kind of like Streets of Rage. Oh, the person I was watching before. There's one about Minecraft. Oh, I see. What Minecraft is like. Do I really want to watch that? I don't know. Oh, what Breath of the Wild is like? I mean, I've seen this. I have a friend, actually, who's not a game player at all. Watch the baking one. I don't know if you're joking or not, Marcus. That's the problem, is I can never tell. Well, it's only 4 minutes. I like that.
Not too long ago, my husband, more lovingly known as the man,
Oh, nice.
asked if we
Okay.
could make some chocolate chip.
Yeah. I see where this is going. It's good. I've also done this. Oh, April Fools. Okay. Well, it's legit though. I mean, it's hard. There's a lot of stuff that to know about baking for sure. But yeah, I have a friend who is a non-gamer, and again, her opinions are better than anyone's I know about games. She just like intuitively sees stuff and is like, this looks like shit. This looks like the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Holy fuck. This is like a crime against humanity that this exists. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you can see that. And, but yeah, she played Breath of the Wild, and she like 100%ed it. So yeah. I think I helped her a little bit, definitely along the way, like told her stuff. And fighting was hard for her. Like fighting, because that's like the most video game knowledge-y thing about it. But other than that, she, yeah. If you do that with puzzle games, you get this is too hard until you get this is boring. Those are the only things I've ever felt from puzzle games. It's like it's, and a lot of times both at the same time. Online multiplayer. Well, let's check out this Minecraft one. See what this is all about. Because I
As
don't
we
want to go to
already
sleep
know,
yet.
My wife, more famously known as the lady I live with, recently made the mistake of showing interest in one of my hobbies. So, of course, instead of just sitting down and enjoying some time together, I recorded her experience of playing various video games for the first time and broadcasted it to the internet. After watching her play, I began to see video games through a new lens, one unfamiliar with typical game mechanics and conventions. There's a lot about the language of video
Join
games that
us.
people who play them often take for granted, and witnessing her try to learn that language has taught me a lot about games and gotten me to think about them in new ways. So to continue her video game education and in turn mine, I decided to keep this informal experiment going by having her play what is
Tell this
arguably
guy
the
to
most
come
important
to
game of
our
the decade,
Discord.
Minecraft.
He'd like it.
A large part of Minecraft's
Can be.
success stems from it appealing to a wide audience. It provides players with a massive set of tools and then gives them the space to decide what they want to do with those tools. There is no single right way to play Minecraft. Some people enjoy building a house in a cool location, and others like to make functioning computers. It is the peak of player freedom. Given my wife's positive experience playing Breath of the Wild, I was curious to see how she would approach a game with even more player freedom. As she is a human who lives on Earth, she had heard of Minecraft before this, but aside from recognizing its blocky art style, she didn't actually know anything about it. For this experiment, I considered having her play one of the beta versions, as that's what I'm most familiar with, but I ended up going with the current Java edition of the game, as it offers a few aids that help players better understand certain systems, most notably the recipe book, which shows how to make certain items. She started with survival mode, then moved on to creative, and lastly, we played some co-op together. This gave her some guidance so she could get a broader sense of Minecraft's major elements while still having some space to discover things on her own. So this is how it went.
Okay, come on now. I'm adequately hyped up to watch the video that I'm watching.
At the start, I decided not to tell her anything about the game aside from the basic controls. I wanted to see what she would make of it by just being dropped in. And as soon as she set foot in her first world, it became immediately clear to me that despite Minecraft being a game that appeals to people of all ages, it doesn't do much at all to help players who are new to it. On a core level, the randomness of each world makes it so a player's first experience can vary greatly. Someone who starts in the middle of a desert is going to have a far tougher time getting started than someone who gets placed in a lush forest. And that's because major elements of the game are easier to pick up in certain kinds of environments. Unfortunately for my wife, she spawned on a small island with no trees or other landforms in sight, and understandably, she had no idea what to do.
What's the point of the game?
Every other game she's played so far has had a relatively clear objective. Even if it wasn't stated directly, there was often at least an intended path to follow. As she isn't familiar with the idea of a sandbox game, she assumed that there must be some sort of intended objective. Given that the only thing of note on the island were a group of pigs, she figured that they must be the key to progression.
Well, I need to kill a piggy.
She didn't. Not having a clear objective proved pretty frustrating for her because she had no idea how to gauge how well she was doing. Obviously, Minecraft is a game about players setting their own objectives, but her being stuck on an island made it hard to set one because she had no idea what she could even do. There are a lot of things in Minecraft that aren't explained in the game itself, and most players won't figure everything out just through trial and error. However, a few of Minecraft's core mechanics become more clear when the player finds wood. Getting wood unlocks recipes that show how to build some of the most important things in the game, like the crafting table, tools, and weapons. Being stranded on an island absent of wood made it pretty much impossible for her to figure anything out on her own. Nighttime came, and as she had no structure to hide in or weapons to fight with, she spent the entire time getting shot by skeletons and blown up by creepers. So I had her create a new world. This time she had a better starting location and, due to her experience in the last one, an immediate objective: find some sort of shelter before dark. Through finding wood and getting a little additional help from me, she started to figure out some of the game's basic concepts. Now stocked with useful supplies, she found a spot near a nice looking cliffside and built a small hut while the sun began to set. While the experience of the first night on the island was a frustrating one, it did teach her an important lesson about how the game works, which led to her falling into the core gameplay loop of survival mode. Build up resources to create a structure during the day, and hide in it at night. Despite her valiant effort, the house she made had some glaring structural flaws, and she found herself once again overwhelmed by monsters. When the sun came back up, she built a more viable hideout, and from that point on, she was able to survive the night with little to no trouble. While I personally enjoy Minecraft's core gameplay loop, her experience highlighted one of the main problems with it. Night kind of sucks.
How's it going?
Not good.
The tension of it coming does give more importance to being productive during the daytime, but failing to build something by dark leads to nearly 10 minutes of guaranteed frustration. And even if the player does get a structure built in time, if they don't have torches, they'll most likely just sit there waiting for daybreak, which is boring. What's worse is that torches are one of the few items that don't get added to the recipe book by just collecting the materials.
This all
Instead,
seems
torches
very
added, the player
Minecraft
needs to
specific.
create a stone pickaxe first. A lot of players will most likely create a stone pickaxe pretty early on, but given how important torches are for exploration and survival, it'd be more beneficial for new players if the recipe book made it clear how to make them just after gathering wood. Obviously, there is always the option to craft things through trial and error, and while I get that making a torch seems intuitive to those familiar with how Minecraft works, for a new player, it really isn't. So during the day, she'd collect and build, and at night she would just wait there. More experienced players would probably use the nighttime to dig a hole and explore underground, but as it took her a while to get torches and her supply of them was fairly limited, she didn't want to go down too far, especially because she didn't know if anything of value would be down there. Around this point, she started having that feeling again of not knowing what the game wanted her to do next. Except this time, she didn't actually care about figuring out what she was supposed to do next, and instead decided to just do the things she enjoyed most.
See, you want me to play this game, but the reality is, I'm just gonna build a house the whole time.
Without realizing it, she pretty much perfectly described Minecraft. While not having an objective definitely made things a little more difficult early on, she ended up appreciating that Minecraft didn't have one because it gave her the space to do what she wanted. In the
Yeah. Wait.
previous experiments, she stuck as closely as possible to the main path, only occasionally straying off of it either by accident or to complete a related task.
Yeah, I mean, these like sandboxy kind of things are you know, certainly Minecraft. I mean, Minecraft is very exceptional, I think, in popular games. But yeah, because you know, you can actually do stuff in Minecraft. And she ended, you know, she's like, I want to build a house, and it's like, well, okay, you can do that. You can kind of do the stuff that you would want to do. Yeah. And it's funny because actually, even with her limited amount of playing games, I think she already had the like, what does this want me to do kind of thing. Like it already started to affect her because every other game she had played was just like, you know, you're an actor in this, just do the thing that we want you to do. Yeah, and she thought she was being like rebellious by just doing whatever. I wish I was younger. Minecraft's one of those games that made me wish I was younger. Like when it came out. Because when it came out and even now, like I really appreciate Minecraft, but like I'm not gonna play fucking Minecraft, you know. But like if Minecraft came out when I was like 10 or something, holy crap, I would have played so much Minecraft. But now it's like, you know, I'd rather just like make a game. But yeah, or play like Dwarf Fortress. I mean, even Dwarf Fortress, like I don't want to play it. But man, yeah, if Minecraft had come out, especially with the multiplayer and everything when I was a kid, geez Louise. Anyways, I think this was cool. I don't know if you guys have any other YouTube videos you want me to comment on. Actually, it's 3:30. I should probably go to sleep. But yeah, that's good. I'm glad I'm doing an extra show. That's what this was. And how long did this go on for? Where's my timer? An hour. Nice. So this is your extra bonus show because I didn't have a show on Monday. And yeah. If you have other videos you want me to watch, put those in the doc too. And thanks for sharing this with me. And yeah, gamers have Stockholm syndrome, and people who don't play games understand games way better than people who do, generally speaking. Not even generally, just like across the board. I'm too, you know, damaged by a lot of this stuff to just like have a fresh view. And like I'm not doing like there's also this like, oh, like children understand things the best, and like this really, it's not like a hard anti-expertise thing where like a fresh blank canvas is the smartest kind of thing. It's that we have a specific campaign of like propaganda that that a whole generations of people have been just taking in and reproducing, and there's people who haven't been affected by that, and so they can see these things for what they are more. Have you guys watched Close Range? I've posted all the time. This is my version of what people see when they
Video game fans are lining up today to be the first to purchase Close Range, the hotly anticipated video game in which players repeatedly shoot people point blank in the face. Onion News Network Tech Trends reporter Jeff Tate has more.
Thanks, Bobby. Close Range is already being hailed by critics as the most important game of the year. The first-person shooter creates an immersive, richly detailed world where players shoot people.
This is what I see. This is totally new Doom.
To gaming.
Just like great literature or film transports you to different worlds, Close Range transports you to a world where you fire bullets into an endless stream of faces.
Fans say it's the game's well-developed characters and storyline that make Close Range so compelling.
You just feel like you're inside this complex character who's thrust into a world where he has to blow people's heads off.
The plot follows AJ, a man with a mysterious past who must explode hundreds of thousands of human faces on a quest to save his kidnapped brother.
Who are you?
Someone who can help. I know where your brother is.
Tell me.
Look out!
I love the tell me.
Range's single-player story is just the beginning. Its outstanding multiplayer mode offers unparalleled interactivity by allowing players to blast each other's faces off.
It's completely open-ended. You can shoot someone in the ear, but you can also shoot them in the eye.
With hundreds of hidden extras like side missions where players can take a break from shooting people in the face to shoot animals in the face, Close Range will
The dance music?
for weeks. And with the sequel, Close Range 2, Chainsaw Dawn,
That's exactly Doom.
next fall, Close Range fans have even more to look forward to. For the Onion News Network, I'm Jeff Tate.
I mean, that just... And like, I feel like someone who doesn't play video games worked for The Onion and came up with this, because this is so on point. Anyways, like someone who plays a lot of video games would not be able to, like, conceive of this joke. Yeah. Anyways. Good shit. Thank you, The Onion. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will be on again tomorrow. And good news, I'm feeling better. I think tonight will be the first night that I won't have to take NyQuil to go to sleep. So, yeah. All right. See you next time. Thanks for coming by.